So the title of the message tonight is Ye Are the Salt of the Earth. Ye are the salt of the earth. Now this comes from the Sermon on the Mount. And when Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, he spoke to a group of ordinary people, fishermen, farmers, tax collectors, mothers, fathers, children, and young disciples who had chosen to follow him. He opened his mouth and delivered truths that we even still hear today. So let's take a look at some of these truths. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 5, and we're going to start in verse 1. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. And when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth, and he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now this is where it starts to get difficult. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you, falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth. Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. So, among all these truths that Jesus spoke to the crowd that day, the one of the most striking to me is he switches and he says, Ye are the salt of the earth. Now notice he didn't say you're going to be the salt of the earth. Right? Like you have to maybe work to get to that point where you're going to be the salt. He doesn't say, well, just try to be salt, as though it were some kind of suggestion, right? He said plainly and powerfully, ye are the salt of the earth. Now, this is not just a statement of identity. It's not just saying, you are this. It is actually a mission. It's giving you a mission. To follow Christ is to be salt in the world. Whether we realize it or not, whether we accept it or not, if we belong to him, we carry this saltiness with us. It comes from the Spirit inside of us. Okay. But why salt? Why did he use salt? Why didn't he say, ye are the gold of the earth? Or ye are the precious jewels of the earth? No, he used salt. Well, what's so special about salt? Well, salt in the ancient world was one of the most common, valuable, and essential substances. So to understand why Jesus chose it, we must consider what salt does, and then we need to apply it as our lives as disciples of Jesus. So before I begin, let me just give some facts about salt. I thought this was very interesting. I looked this up as I was preparing the sermon. Salt is 40% sodium and 60% chloride, which I kind of knew that. The human body needs salt to survive. It regulates water balance, nerve functions, and muscle contraction. Without enough salt, you can experience low sodium levels that can cause weakness, confusion, and even death. The average person consumes about 9 to 12 grams of salt daily, far above the recommended 5 grams. Most of the salt we eat doesn't even come from the salt shaker. It's processed in the foods that we eat. The world produces 300 million tons of salt per year. The top producers are China, United States, and India. Only about 6% of this salt is actually used in food. The rest is used in industry for making plastics, detergents, paper, glass, using it on the road to de-ice. It keeps the transportation safe when it snows. If you have too little salt, it can cause fatigue and cramping. In fact, too much salt causes high blood pressure. So there's sort of a balance there as well. Chemically, salt is remarkable. It's stable and pure. And unlike many compounds, it does not spoil or decay. It doesn't change. It stays. It keeps its saltiness. That's why in ancient covenants, they used this salt as a symbol of permanence. Modern water softeners use salt to remove calcium and magnesium. Salt-based batteries are being developed for eco-friendly energy. Saline solution is used to clean wounds. Our oceans contain 5 quintillion tons of dissolved salt. That's 5 billion tons of salt in the ocean. I thought those were interesting. But here's some things that I thought even more interesting, and I want to focus on those. The first thing I want to share about salt is that salt preserves. Salt preserves. In Jesus' day, there were no refrigerators or freezers. If a fisherman caught a fish in the Sea of Galilee, he couldn't keep it in a cooler or put it in a refrigerator or a freezer. They would rub them with salt, and the salt would slow down the decay and keep the fish edible. Salt was life-preserving. Without it, food spoiled quickly. So when Jesus says, "Ye are the salt of the earth," he's saying, my people, you are the salt. You are here in this world to slow down the decay. This world is rotting because of sin. It's full of corruption, selfishness, immorality, and rebellion against God. Left alone, societies rot faster than the meat left out in the sun. But God, in his mercy, scatters his people, sort of shakes them out, right? Like grains of salt into families, communities, workplaces, schools, and nations to hold back the rot of sin. Let's think about Abraham. Abraham, if we remember from Genesis chapter 18, the story of Sodom, and Abraham pleaded for that city. Abraham asked God if he would spare the city if there were only 10 righteous people found there. Remember, he started with 50, and they said, well, what about 40, God? And what about 30? And on, down. And finally, he got about down to 10. Kind of figured, okay, maybe Lot and his family, let's see, okay, maybe if there's 10 righteous there, God, will you spare the city? Yeah, if there's 10 righteous there, I'll spare the city. The salt. Those were the salt. That was the salt. Think of Joseph in Egypt. Through his integrity and wisdom, he preserved not only Egypt, but many surrounding nations during the 7-year famine. And we can think of Daniel in Babylon, or Esther in Persia. People who lived in corrupt empires, yet they became the salt that preserved life. Even this reminded me of even modern day. Charlie Kirk. He was salt. He was salt in this earth. Imagine a piece of meat left out in the summer sun. Within hours, it begins to stink. That's what happens to cultures and communities when there is no salt. But if you rub salt into it, the decay slows down. The salt cannot make the meat last forever, but it can keep it from rotting quickly. Likewise, Christians cannot stop the end of the world. We can't stop the judgment that's coming from God. Jesus told us the world will pass away, but what we can do is we can preserve truth, justice, and goodness in our generation. Let's ask ourselves, are we preserving godliness in our homes, or in our workplaces, or in our communities? Or are we silent, letting the decay run unchecked? Sometimes we get a little busy. Sometimes, we're not out there doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we let the world, just slip by. Remember, Jesus did not call us to be hidden jars of stored salt, not locked up in a cupboard. He called us to be rubbed into the world where the stench is, where the rot is, so that by his Spirit we might hold back decay. The second thing the second attribute we can give to salt is salt adds flavor. Now let's be honest, anything without salt, popcorn without salt, what's the point? Right? What's the point? It's lifeless. What about soup? I like to put salt in soup. I try not to use too much, but, we need it. Even sweet desserts often need a little pinch of salt to bring out the full flavor. Grits. Salt awakens the taste buds. It brings food alive. That's why Paul says in Colossians 4:6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. Just a little bit of salt in your speech, just a little bit of grace. Okay? As followers of Christ, we are called not only to preserve, but also to add flavor to life. The world often sees Christianity as boring, dull, and lifeless. But when we live out Christ's love, we bring joy, hope, peace, and purpose that cannot be found anywhere else. A lot of you may not know this, but to make extra money, extra living, I drive Lyft. Right? I drive people around every day. I try to witness to these people as I drive. I try to give that saltiness to them, right? You would be amazed at what this world needs and how quickly people melt when you deliver that salt to them. Think about a time you sat at a table and tasted something without salt. You immediately reached for the salt shaker. Why? Because the salt makes the food enjoyable. Likewise, when people interact with you, do they feel a joy, a hope, a kindness that flavors their day? Or do they walk away with bitterness in their mouth? So let's ask ourselves, do our words and actions season life with joy? Or am I the kind of person whose presence brings encouragement, laughter, peace, and hope? Or do I drain others with negativity? A salty Christian makes people hungry for God's joy. The third thing I want to share about salt is that salt purifies. Salt purifies. In the Old Testament, salt was used as a symbol of purity and covenant. Newborn babies were rubbed with salt as a cleansing practice. Sacrifices offered to God were to be seasoned with salt as a sign of purity and permanence. Mickey, can we bring up Leviticus 2:13? I want you to read this. And every oblation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt. Neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy God to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt. God likes salt in his meat. God likes salt. Salt in the ancient world had a cleansing property. It was used to fight infection, and even today, we use it in saline solutions to clean wounds. Salt heals as it purifies. As believers, we are to live lives that point to holiness and purity. Our very presence should discourage sin and encourage righteousness. When I worked at a dealership. It was Fairway Ford in Augusta, Georgia. I was in control of the technicians, how much they were paid when they did a job. And they knew my life. They knew what I represented. And when they would walk into my office, they would immediately stop any foul language. They wouldn't do it. And if it slipped out, they would say, "Frank, I apologize." Why? Why would they do that? Because I was the salt in their community. They knew that. They respected that. Where Christians are faithful, society should be cleaner, not dirtier, purer, not polluted. We should not be the ones laughing at the filthy jokes, spreading gossip, or indulging in dishonesty. We are called to be a cleansing influence. Let's picture a glass of water. You take a glass of water and you put just a little drop of dirt in it. Right? It's contaminated. The whole glass is contaminated. But now we picture putting salt into a wound. Well, it may sting, but it cleans. It purifies. That is what holiness sometimes does. It makes people uncomfortable at first. It convicts, but ultimately it will heal and purify. Ask ourselves, are we living in purity? Do people see Christ's holiness in me? When I walk into a room, do I lift the conversation higher or do I join in the gossip? Salt that purifies is a powerful testimony in a dirty world. Well, there's another thing that salt does, a fourth thing. Salt creates thirst. It creates thirst. You eat a bag of salty chips and what happens? You get really thirsty, right? I mean, I can't go to sit at a movie and drink, eat the popcorn and not have something to drink, right? You get really thirsty. Salty naturally makes people reach for water. In the same way, Christians should make others thirsty for the living water, Jesus Christ. Our peace in trials, our joy in sorrow, our forgiveness when wronged, our integrity when tempted, these should stir up thirst in the hearts of unbelievers. Jesus said in John 7:37, "If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink." Our role is to live in such a way that people notice the difference and ask, Where did you get that peace? Where do you find that joy? That question is the thirst that we create by being salt. There was a Christian soldier who was in a barrack. His fellow soldiers mocked him for praying at his bunk. Well, one night, after weeks of ridicule, one of the men came to him quietly and asked, "How do you keep your peace? I can't sleep at night." "But you never seem to be afraid." That mocking soldier had grown thirsty watching the salty life of his comrade. We know where his comrade got his peace. From Jesus, from Christ. So ask yourself, is my life creating thirst? Do people see something in me that makes them want to know Jesus? Or do they see fear and anger and gossip and bitterness that is already in the world? A salty life makes people long for that living water. But Jesus also gives us a warning about salt. Salt can lose its savor. Salt can lose its savor. If the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing. Well, Frank, I thought you said that salt is, it's like pure. It can't be, impure. It can't be, messed up. Well, salt in itself is pure, and it will stay pure. But in these times, in Jesus' times, when they got salt, it had impurities already in it. There were other minerals mixed in, right? So in Jesus' day, salt came mixed with impurities. If the true salt content was washed away, all that was left was a white powder that looked like salt but had no flavor. People would throw it out onto the ground to harden paths, and it was useless except to be trodden underfoot. There's a warning for us here. A Christian who loses his saltiness, who blends so much with the world that you can no longer tell the difference, becomes ineffective. We are not called to be half salt and half world. The world does not need diluted Christianity. It needs salty Christians. Imagine a doctor prescribing medicine, but the pill is 90% sugar and only 10% medicine. Well, it looks right, but it won't heal. That's the picture of Christians who lose their savor. They look like disciples on the outside, but there's no power, no holiness, no witness on the inside. So once again, let's ask ourselves, have I lost my saltiness? Am I blending in so much in the world that no one can tell I'm a Christian? If so, I need to return to Christ, confess my compromise, and ask Jesus to restore my savor. So in conclusion, Jesus' words are not just poetic, they are powerful. Ye are the salt of the earth. As salt, we preserve righteousness in a world that decays. As salt, we add flavor of joy and love to a bland, bitter culture. As salt, we purify by living in holiness and truth. As salt, we create thirst for living water, pointing people to Jesus. But we must heed the warning. Let's not lose our savor, but stay salty for the Lord. Am I living as salt? Am I preserving, flavoring, purifying, and creating thirst? Or have I grown tasteless, blended into the world, and lost my effectiveness? If you feel your saltiness has faded, well, take heart. Jesus can restore it. Bring your life back under his authority and ask him to renew your witness. Then leave this place determined to shake out the salt, to live boldly, joyfully, purely, and powerfully for Christ. Remember, Jesus didn't call us to stay in the salt shaker. He calls us to be poured out into the earth where the world needs salt the most. Thank you, Pastor.